Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night of the local time. And first we're going to discuss the relations between Zaluzhny and Zelensky. According to information we have, Zelensky actually met with Zaluzhny and invited him to resign. Zaluzhny replied that it is the president's right to choose who to work with, but he refused to write a resignation letter and does not intend to do so, reports Zerkalo Nedeli media citing its sources in Zaluzhny's entourage. Very likely that by saying that it is the president's right to choose who to work with, obviously Zaluzhny was talking about Joe Biden, because as I understand, Joe Biden is the president of Zaluzhny or something like this. Anyway, we got more details. Maybe he was talking about Putin, who knows. Anyway, we got some updates about the Zaluzhny office, because he's not just the only man who is responsible for the Ukrainian military situation on the ground and so on. He has his own office, and according to information we have, the Ukrainians, the office, Zaluzhny office, will also write the resignation letter if their commander, if their chef, boss will be dismissed. So with this they are trying to show Zelensky and the world that this is not like the personal will of Zaluzhny, but this is complete political situation. Furthermore, this is very important words. Zaluzhny replied that it's the president's right to choose who to work with. This is very important because I'll remind you that on the 30th of March, Zelensky is, according to the constitution of Ukraine, is the final day of his president. But he will continue being president because there is a martial law in Ukraine and so on. Maybe this is also something like a message from Zaluzhny that after 30th of March you will never be able to dismiss me or something like this. So we'll follow the situation, because as I understand the situation is getting worse and worse. Now we are moving to the situation on the ground, and according to information we have, the Ukrainians start sending significant number of reinforcements to the Kupiansk direction with the purpose to stabilize the area. And the Russians probably knew that, discovered that, and as a result of another Iskander strike, the Russians destroyed a fuel depot in the vicinity of Zmiev. We have the video of, we have the photo of explosion, and we have the video of attack itself. So for example, on this, no, video doesn't work, but on this video we might see, yes, we might see the results of Iskander strike. The fuel depot was destroyed. This is a very important thing, because the Russians probably know that the Ukrainians will try to reinforce this territory with the soldiers, and that's why they try to ruin the Ukrainian logistic. Now we're moving to Kislovka, Kotlarovka. We have a lot of details and updates from this territory as well. First, let's start about Tabaevka. According to the Russian sources, the Russians managed during the previous 24 hours improve their positions around the village, and according to this map, according to this Russian source, as a result of offensive operation, the Russians added additional territory around Tabaevka, and this is something like Russian control by the morning of 30th of January of 2024 of the local time. So as you can see, the most important from this map is that the Russians managed to cut the main supply road that Ukrainians were using from Pishchana to Kislovka-Kotlarovka area. So this road is no longer valid for Ukrainians. This area was cut by the Russian physically. Of course, very unlikely the Russians are going to continue offensive operation further to the west, because due to strongholds that located on the line of possible Russian movements. So as I understand, for now they will stop here and they will try to think what to do next. Other mappers confirms the same situation, additional progress of the Russians and so on. Furthermore, we got more details about how that operation happened. As you can see, the previous Russian victories, the latest Russian victories, completely based on some special operations and really on the work of intelligence. For example, when talking about Avdiivka, that was completely intelligence operation, when the Russians managed to discover the pipe and created that pipe offensive operation, when they bypassed the main Ukrainian defense belt, and when they bypassed this territory, they managed to encircle the Ukrainian forces in Tsarskaya Khota, and that allowed the main Russian forces, troopers and infantry, to capture significant territories. The same situation about Tabaevka. The Russians were made significant intelligence and reconnaissance work. First of all, they discovered and found the weak point in Ukrainian defense, and that was 103rd Territorial Defense Brigade. Completely corrupted brigade. Billions, millions or billions of Ukrainian money were stolen by commanders, and this is the reason why the forces on the ground haven't received additional munition, weapon, tanks, I don't know, FPV drones, equipment, armor, and so on. And the Russians managed to discover this, recognize this by intelligence, and they took a decision to attack exactly against the position of this brigade, because they knew for sure that this brigade can't stand and can't hold the Russian pressure. Meanwhile, the main Ukrainian military authorities thought that this brigade was supplied on the proper level and that this brigade is able to stand against the Russian pressure. So this is another reconnaissance intelligence Russian victory, and we can say that the more operations we'll see, probably the more such updates we're going to receive. Other Russian sources reported that as a result of offensive operation, the Russians managed to enter and to establish control over Berestov. For now, we don't have any geolocated confirmations, or at least some reliable confirmations, just some talks, rumors from some Russian channels. Additional sources reported about further Russian progress in direction of Kislovka-Kotlarovka, and according to information, these territories under Russian control. This is a very interesting update, because as you can see, this possible Russian progress goes through the main defense belt in this area, these trenches, these fortifications. So it's very interesting whether the Russians managed to establish control over this, or it's just rumors. So we'll see anyway within the next days, obviously. Now we're moving to Liman direction. The Russians and the Ukrainian sources continue publishing the videos of Russian offensive operation. On this video, for example, we see a series of Russian attacks in direction of Yampolov-Katerny, and there were two attacks, and two attacks were repelled by the Ukrainians. To be more precise, those two attacks were stopped at the beginning when the Russian tanks entered, the Russian heavy tanks in the head of convoys and entered the minefields. So the Russians always stopped any attempts to attack when the head tank was destroyed as a result of mine explosion. Then the rest of the forces turned back and moved back to in direction of, let's say, Kremina or something like this. On this video, we can see how the Ukrainian FPV drone attacked another Russian armored vehicle somewhere along the tree line. So we see the Russian continue concentration of forces right in front of Yampolovka. Obviously, they will continue offensive operation. Probably 2-3 next weeks. There are going to be very heavy clashes for the forests. So let's wait, and we're going to receive more updates. Now we are moving to Bilogorovka area. Today, the special unit Akhmat published additional video of FPV drones bombing of Ukrainian positions inside of this industrial area. According to some sources, this territory was already captured by the Russians, but now we continue receiving updates about FPV drone strikes. As I understand, the Russians still try to clear this territory, and this is very important, because if we increase the numbers of updates, let's say for 2 days, we see the Russian concentration of FPV drone strikes. Basically, the Russians can't enter industrial zone because this territory is completely under Ukrainian control from the landfills that located on the southwest of industrial area. So before attack, before any offensive operation, first the Russians need to suppress the Ukrainian positions on the hills, and this is exactly what they're doing right now. And after the suppression of these positions, the Russians may start the clearing operation. So this is like a combined operation, and this is exactly what the Russians are trying to implement right now. Anyway, according to these geolocation and concentrations, very likely the Russians will establish control over this territory very soon. Now we are moving to Veselaya area. After the Russians established control over the village Veselaya, we stopped receiving any updates from this territory, but to tell the truth, the clashes in this area were very heavy. We got just one, let's say, proofs of that is the geolocation in comparison of artillery concentration of fire from 30th and 23rd of January. And on this footage, satellite footage, we can see approximately the concentrated fire area of the Russian forces. And according to this short video, we can say that currently the Russians are focused on 2 areas. Russian artillery is trying to penetrate and destroy the Ukrainian positions in this area. Another Russian focus lays somewhere here. The Russians try to destroy this forest belt, and also the Russians are trying to attack this supply road. So there are still a lot of job, but the Russians are doing this job, and this is obviously going to take for a few weeks while the Russians are able to destroy the Ukrainians and positions there, and after that they will start the ground operation to capture every single stronghold and dig in deeper and to encircle Razdolovka from the north. Now we are moving to Bogdanovka area. The Russians continue bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions in the central part and in the western part of Bogdanovka. As you can see, the focus slowly, step by step, but is moving further to the west, which means that probably very likely step by step, building by building, ruin by ruin, the Russians are moving further along Bogdanovka. But anyway, there are still a lot of job to do, because this is one of the strongest, one of the most powerful stronghold belts in the entire special military operation, probably even stronger for now than in Avdiivka, because the strongest defense belt in Avdiivka was captured by the Russians. And we have FPV drone strikes in Kalinovka, in the western part of Bogdanovka. We have Russian FPV drone strikes against the main defense belt between railway station Valerianovka and Popovo Forest, FPV drone bombing. We have Russian TOS strikes and aviation bombing with FAPS 500 Popovo Forest. So as you can see, the same story as we saw yesterday, the day before, and the day maybe a week ago. So, and there are still a lot of job to do. The only important thing that we need to know to summarize everything is the same story, to analyze the picture of Russian artillery focus, let's say on the 30th of January, and let's say the fresh one, 23rd of January. So on this video we can see the proofs that we were talking about. Currently the Russians have few concentration areas, and when talking about the situation, the first Russian concentration artillery area lays somewhere here. So the Russians are trying to reduce everything in destroy the Ukrainian fortifications right in front of Grigorievka. The second Russian artillery concentration area is the forest to the north. This is the forest, and we see how the pictures and how the situation changes exactly in this point. So the Russians also attack and bomb the Ukrainian positions here, so very likely they have some plans to enter this territory. Obviously the Russians, according to this video, this short update, attacks Bogdanovka heavily, and of course the Russians attack the railways, and the Russians attack Popovo Forest. So this is the second area of Russian concentration of artillery fire, and of course this is the final area of concentration of Russian fire. So this is approximately, and of course Bogdanovka, 4-5 positions that the Russians try to penetrate, and there are still a lot of job to do. Obviously this artillery strikes will not be ended in a week, maybe even. When talking about Ivanovska, we have the same analysis. So to compare the artillery concentration, we see that the main Russian focus lays on the three lines from Ivanovska to 215.7 hill. This letter, this small symbol, you see this, and just pay your attention to the let's say southeastern edge of the village. We see concentration, very heavy concentration of artillery fire. We are talking about this territory, which confirms very likely that either the Russians are there or the Ukrainians try to destroy the Russian foothold and to force them to step back. When talking about let's say Klishevka, we haven't received anything from this territory during the previous 24 hours, during the previous night. When talking about Avdiivka, we have just few updates about the confirmation of Russian progress on the southern part from Yasinovata, from industrial zone, which confirms the Russian further progress during the day. I believe we're going to receive more updates. Now we are moving to Marinka direction, Pervomaisky direction. We have additional video of Russian FPV drone strikes. The Russians continue clearing this area, and there are still a lot of job to do. It's obviously not 1 week clashes. It's going to be months need for the Russians to establish control over Pervomaiska. Very interesting details we're getting from the South Donetsk direction. Once again, a concentration of Russian fire. And this is very important, and based on this video we can say that the Russians currently have up to 5-6 areas of their concentration, and these are their priority targets. The first area of Russian concentration of fire is this stronghold between Georgievka, Marinka and Krasnogorovka. This is the primary target for the Russians, and on this map, on this video, this is the area. You see this. The next area is the roads, the streets between Georgievka and Marinka itself. So these territories also on the very heavy fire of Russian artillery. This area the Ukrainians used to send reinforcements, and this is the area where the Russians are planning to move. The third area of Russian concentration is the central part of Georgievka, this one. So the Russians are attacking this territory. Probably there is something like a very huge stronghold from the Ukrainian side. And the next defense belt the Russians are trying to penetrate is the strongholds to the north of Pobeda. So the next target is this area of the Russian artillery. So which means that the Russians are trying to improve their positions around Marinka and to capture capture, of course, Krasnogorovka, Pobeda, and to capture the strongholds on the way to Krasnogorovka. Today we got geolocated confirmation of Russian offensive operation and Russian storming positions of the Ukrainian forces in Zvirinets, which is like the second 100% confirmation of Russian control over this territory. And now there are no doubts about the Russian progress. Furthermore, I'll remind you that according to more or less very reliable resources, to be more precise, the Russians established control over this territory as well. And as we discussed, two main strongholds in this area currently are under Russian control. There is one left to the west, and if the Russians are able to capture this territory, this is going to be probably the beginning of the end of Novomikhailivka area. Furthermore, according to information we have, also according to, let's say, comparison of the focus, we see that there are few areas of Russian concentration of fire. And first of all, the Russians are bombing heavily this stronghold. Also, the Russians are bombing this tree line. Probably the Russians understand that there are still chances from Ukrainian side to start the counter-attack, so that's why they try to be on the safe side, and they're destroying any attempts from the Ukrainian side to do this, like any wish. And today we got also very interesting concentrated area of Russian fire. It's the southwest of Novomikhailivka, and I'm talking about this territory. Very likely there is a very powerful and big and huge Ukrainian defense belt or stronghold, and the Russians are bombing this territory heavily. So as I understand, the Russians are trying and planning to force the Ukrainians to step back and to destroy their positions there, to force them to withdraw, and after they will move their infantry there, and this is something like the gates for further offensive Russian operation in direction of the road TO524 between Konstantinovka and Vodyano. So now this is the primary target for the Russians. Also, the Russians continue bombing the positions in the north of Mykolaiv with 12 tower systems, and they're trying to, let's say, to penetrate this defense belt. The Russians made during the previous months few attempts to storm this territory, but all of them failed. We haven't received anything from Vremivka tactical bridgehead, just we have updated the map according to geolocations we have, and the same story about Rabotina. The only thing that we need to pay attention to is that the Russians start attacking Rabotina with, let's say, started ground operation. Every single day we receive more and more videos of not just of FPV drone strikes or artillery strikes. We start or let's say tanks attacks from hidden positions. We start receiving the ground operation using infantry. So let's say it's like the real fact that the Russians have already started the storming operation of Rabotina. When talking about Kherson, we haven't received anything during the previous night, which confirms that the situation is completely stable, and neither the Russians nor the Ukrainians have any wish to change the situation on the ground. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds you to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.